Imagine, for a moment, that you are the protagonist of this dark, medieval reality. It is the year 1325. There are no streetlights, no electricity, and no hum of a distant city. It is total, suffocating darkness. You are lying on a pallet of straw, but calling it a house bed is an insult to the very word. It is a heap of rotting, damp, organic matter, infested with creatures that have claimed this space as their kingdom long before you arrived. As you lie there, you can hear them, the faint, scurrying sounds of mice behind the thin, wooden walls. You can smell the pungent, earthy odor of the mud floor, mixed with the sharp, acidic stench of animal urine from the livestock huddled in the corner. You are not alone. You share this four-walled box of misery with your entire family. The air is thick, humid, and stale. There is no ventilation. Every breath you take feels heavy, filled with the dust of the straw and the dander of the animals. Your bones ache. It is a deep, bone-chilling cold that creeps into your joints, the kind of dampness that settles in your marrow. You are only 22, yet your spine feels like an old, rusted hinge that is being forced open. You haven't had a proper night of rest in years. Your sleep is constantly interrupted, not by a notification or a soft alarm, but by the relentless, maddening itching of lice crawling across your scalp and the sharp, stinging bites of bed bugs burrowing into your skin. You try to move to find a softer spot, but the straw is matted and compressed. It offers no support. It feels like lying on a bed of dry, jagged twigs. You roll over and hear the straw rustle, a sound that seems deafening in the silence of the night. Outside, the village is deathly still, but it is not a peaceful silence. It is a tense, fearful waiting. People believe that at this hour, the world belongs to things that should not be named, shadows, whispers, and the judgment of a world that is fundamentally cruel. Then it happens. The sound you have been dreading, the church bell. It doesn't chime. It screams. The iron hammer strikes the metal with a violence that vibrates through your chest. It is a harsh, discordant sound that tears through the heavy air, announcing that the time for respite is over. You have to get up. You have to face the day. There is no 5 more minutes, tape. There is no snooze button. Your life is not your own. You sit up, and the cold air hits your skin like a physical blow. You pull your only garment, a rough, scratchy wool tunic, closer to your chest, but it offers no warmth. It is damp, likely from the moisture dripping through the thatched roof above. You look around the dim room. Your parents are already stirring, their movements slow and heavy with exhaustion. Your younger siblings are curled together, shivering in their sleep. You stand up, your feet touching the cold, uneven earth floor. It is sticky in places, a mix of mud, spilled water, and whatever the goat decided to leave behind in the night. You don't have slippers. You don't have a carpet. You stand there, shivering, feeling the grime of the day before still clinging to your skin, knowing that there will be no warm shower, no clean clothes, and no breakfast waiting for you. This is not just a morning. This is the beginning of an endless, grueling endurance test. You are in the heart of the Middle Ages, and the only goal you have is to survive until the sun sets again. You have managed to haul your aching body out of the straw-filled hovel, But the true horror of your existence is only just beginning. Nature is calling, and in the year 5, that is a sentence of profound humiliation and disgust. In your modern life, you are used to the concept of privacy. A locked door, a quiet room, a hygienic space. But here, that concept is non-existent. You step outside, and the first thing that hits you isn't the morning air. It's the stench. It is a thick, nauseating wall of odor that greets you every single morning. It is the smell of a world that has nowhere for its waste to go. If you are lucky enough to be a peasant, your bathroom is a wooden bucket tucked behind a thin, rotting piece of fencing. It is the community hub of filth. The bucket is almost certainly already overflowing, filled with the remnants of the previous day. The sight alone is enough to turn your stomach inside out. But you have no choice. You do your business in the freezing cold, surrounded by the constant, aggressive buzzing of flies that seem to thrive on the very air you're breathing. But where do you go from there? There is no toilet paper. There is no plumbing. You reach for whatever is at hand. A handful of coarse straw, a damp clump of moss, or perhaps a rough, jagged stone. It is a ritual of misery that leaves your skin raw and irritated. And yet, it is the most sophisticated option you have. And then, there is the disposal. You have to take that bucket and empty it. You walk out toward the street, your heart pounding with the hope that you won't slip in the sludge that already coats the ground. You are supposed to shout a warning, "Gardy-loo," a desperate, pathetic attempt to keep your neighbors from being doused in your household's waste. But in reality, no one cares. The streets are not paved with stone or asphalt. They are paved with layers of refuse that have been accumulating for decades. As you walk, your bare feet sink into a soft, squelching mixture of mud, animal droppings, and rotting vegetable scraps. Every step is a gamble. You don't know what you are stepping on, and you don't want to know. There is a deep, primal fear in your gut that if you slip, you will be face first in a swamp of human and animal decay that could lead to an infection that would kill you within the week. This isn't just a lack of luxury. It is a war against your own biology. The local water source, a nearby stream that looks sparkling and clear in the early light, is actually a lethal cocktail of parasites and bacteria. Upstream, the neighbor has dumped their waste. Further up, a dead animal is decomposing in the shallows. You know this. You see the murky swirls in the water, but you still have to drink. Your only defense is a weak, watery ale, which at least has been boiled, providing a tiny, flimsy shield against the microscopic killers waiting in every drop. You stand there in the middle of this thriving village, surrounded by the sound of coughing neighbors and the low grunts of livestock, and you realize that civilization here is just a thin, fragile veneer over a pile of filth. You haven't even started your day's work yet, and you are already covered in the grime of a society that has forgotten how to be clean. You feel the itch of 1,000 invisible insects beneath your tunic. You feel the cold dampness of the ground soaking into your calloused feet, and for a fleeting, dangerous second, you wish that this nightmare would just end. But it won't. The sun is rising higher. The Lord's men are beginning their rounds, and you have to move. You wipe your hands on your tunic, making yourself even filthier in the process. And you prepare to face the field, where the real, back-breaking labor of your existence awaits. You have survived the morning air and the stench of the streets, but your stomach is now screaming. You are physically weak, your body depleted by the cold of the night and the constant underlying exhaustion. You head back toward your hut, not for a meal, but for a caloric transaction. You don't eat for pleasure. You eat to keep the machine that is your body from shutting down completely. You reach for the wooden bowl. It is chipped, stained, and carries the ghost of 1,000 meals eaten before yours. This is your life staple, the pottage. To a modern viewer, this might look like a rustic farm-to-table stew. Don't be fooled. It is a gray, gelatinous slurry, a thick mess of whatever survived the winter. There are no fresh herbs here, no seasoning, no salt. Salt is a luxury for the rich, something kept under lock and key like gold. Your pottage is a simmering, endless experiment. It has been bubbling in an iron pot over the central fire for days, perhaps weeks. New ingredients are simply dumped on top of the old ones. A handful of coarse, dusty oats, some woody root vegetables that were dug up from the frozen ground, and maybe, if you are incredibly lucky, a few beans. The texture is slimy, a thick, gluey mass that clings to the wooden spoon. You take a bite, and it tastes of smoke, ash, and nothingness. It is lukewarm at best. You are forced to swallow it, trying not to think about the layer of soot that has drifted down from the roof into the pot, or the occasional grit of sand that crunches between your teeth, remnants of the millstone that ground the grain, now slowly eroding your enamel with every single mouthful. But the pottage is only half the battle. Beside the bowl sits the bread. You pick it up, and it feels like a weapon. It is heavy, dense, and hard enough to crack a human skull. This is not the fluffy golden loaves you see in bakeries today. This bread is made from a desperate mix of rye, barley, and almost anything the miller could sweep off the floor. It is often bulked up with sawdust to make the flour last longer, or ground up acorns that leave a bitter, acidic aftertaste that catches in the back of your throat. You don't slice this bread. You negotiate with it. You have to soak it in your thin ale or your pottage for minutes just to make it soft enough to tear. Even then, it is a task. As you chew, you feel your jaw muscles straining, a dull ache starting to form. You are literally fighting your breakfast. And then there is the liquid. You reach for the jug of ale. It is warm, murky, and smells faintly like a damp cellar. This is small beer, the low alcohol, cloudy brew that is the only thing standing between you and a gruesome death by dysentery. You drink it because you have no other choice. It is a bitter, sour liquid that leaves a film on your tongue. Children drink it, the elderly drink it, and you drink it. It provides a tiny, fleeting warmth, but mostly it just keeps you from the agony of the waterborne parasites that would turn your insides into a war zone. There is no conversation. There is no joy. Your family eats in a tense, rhythmic silence. You are all watching each other, monitoring the pot, secretly hoping that someone else might leave a scrap behind. You are constantly underfed, a hunger that is not just in your stomach, but in your bones. As you scrape the last of the gray sludge from the bowl, you look at your hands. They are stained, calloused, and trembling slightly from malnutrition. You are 22 years old, yet your body feels like a ghost of a human. And as you put down the bowl, the fire flickers and dies. The morning is gone. The easy part is over. Now, the sun is high enough to see the fields and the long, agonizing trek to the land that you do not own, but which owns you, begins. You stand up, your stomach barely holding on to the meager fuel you forced down, and you prepare to walk out into a world that doesn't care if you live or die. The breakfast, if you can call it that, has barely settled in your stomach before the reality of your day hits. You like a physical weight. There is no desk, no office, no commute in a car. Your commute is a long, trudging walk across fields of mud and sharp stones, and your office is the vast, unforgiving expanse of the Lord's land. You don't own a single inch of the ground you stand on. Everything, the soil, the trees, the water, even the air you breathe, belongs to a man who lives in a stone fortress on the hill, a man who likely doesn't even know your name. You are a serf, a piece of the landscape, and today that landscape demands your blood. The work is brutal. Your tools are primitive, a wooden hoe reinforced with a thin, rusting scrap of iron and a sickle that is more jagged than sharp. Your hands are already a map of misery, deep, calloused cracks in your skin that never fully heal, stained with the permanent brown dye of the earth. You begin at sunrise. You are digging a drainage ditch, a task that requires you to bend your spine at a 90-degree angle for hours on end. Every movement is a symphony of pain. Your lower back screams with a dull, throbbing ache that never relents. Your knees, forced to press into the damp, cold mud, are swollen and raw. As the sun climbs higher, the field transforms into a pressure cooker. There is no shade. There is no water cooler. There is only the relentless, pounding heat of the sun reflecting off the dirt, baking your skin until it cracks. You are wearing that same heavy wool tunic from yesterday, and it is now soaked through with sweat. It sticks to your skin like a second layer of misery, chafing your thighs and armpits with every step you take. If you are a woman, the labor is doubled. You are not just working the fields, you are the backbone of the household. Between spells of weeding and harvesting, you are expected to keep the fire going, haul water from the distant well, spin wool until your fingers bleed, and watch over the children. The children, who are barely 5 or 6 years old, are not playing. They are beside you, pulling weeds with their tiny, dirt-crusted hands, their faces already etched with the same premature lines of exhaustion that mark your own. They are learning the lesson that everyone in this world knows. Work is not a way to get ahead. Work is the only barrier between you and the grave. And if you slip, if you drop your hoe or take a moment to straighten your back, the Lord's bailiff is watching. He is a man who thrives on the misery of others, patrolling the fields with a heavy staff, ready to dish out fines or physical punishment for the slightest sign of laziness. You are working yourself to death, but you are not working for yourself. The grain you harvest will be carted away to the Lord's granary. The wool you spin will be turned into his fine clothes. You are a ghost, laboring to build a kingdom that will never grant you a seat at the table. There is no clocking out. The sun doesn't care about your blisters or your fever. You keep digging. You keep reaping. You keep dragging your feet through the heavy mud until the world turns purple and the shadows stretch long across the ground. Your muscles are twitching. Your mind is a fog of pure survival, and the only thing keeping you moving is the terrifying knowledge that if you stop, if you collapse, if your body finally breaks, the village won't mourn you. It will simply replace you. You are a biological machine running on empty, and the only reward for your labor today is the chance to wake up and do it all again tomorrow. You have survived the back-breaking labor in the fields, but as you trudge back to your hut, the true, constant agony of your life makes itself known. It is an itch, not a normal, fleeting itch, but a deep, maddening, skin-crawling sensation that never, ever stops. Your wardrobe is not a choice. It is a permanent attachment. You own exactly one outfit. It is a coarse, heavy tunic made of undyed wool, stitched together by someone who didn't understand the meaning of a seam. Beneath it, you wear a linen shift if you're lucky. If you are not, you are going commando, your skin rubbing directly against the abrasive, sweat-soaked fibers of your only garment. There is no washing machine. There is no soap. There is no concept of a clean day. Your tunic has been on your body for months, possibly years. It has absorbed your sweat, the rain, the mud from the fields, and the filth of the village streets. It is stiff, crusted with dried grime, and it smells like a compost pile that has been baking in the sun. But the smell is the least of your problems. The real inhabitants of your clothes are the ones you can't even fully see. You are a walking, breathing sanctuary for an entire ecosystem of parasites. Fleas jump from the straw of your mattress onto your skin. Lice, the relentless invaders, burrow deep into the seams of your wool tunic, laying eggs in the fabric that you can't hope to reach. Bed bugs, those silent nocturnal monsters, wait for you to close your eyes so they can feast on your blood. You are never truly alone. You are an insect farm. The sensation is constant. It feels like tiny needles are pricking your skin every second of the day. You find yourself scratching constantly, your fingers digging into your own flesh, trying to find a relief that doesn't exist. Your armpits, your groin, the nape of your neck. These are the battlefields where you are losing a war against creatures too small to see, but powerful enough to make your life a living hell. Your skin is a testament to this war. It is raw, red, and covered in angry, weeping sores. When you scratch, you break the skin, and because your hands are covered in the bacteria of the fields, those wounds quickly become infected. You have patches of dry, scaly skin that burn with every movement. You try to soothe the itch with a little bit of animal fat or a rag soaked in murky water, but that only makes the environment more hospitable for the vermin. There is no dermatologist. There is no hydrocortisone cream. There is no one to tell you that you are suffering from a chronic infestation of parasites. People simply call it the itch, as if it were a natural, inevitable part of being human. You see your neighbors scratching just as frantically as you do. You see the priest at the altar shifting uncomfortably, his fingers surreptitiously digging into his robes. Sometimes you look at your tunic and you see them, the dark specks of lice moving through the fibers. You might try to pick them off, but it is an impossible task. You are fighting a tide. As soon as you kill one, 10 more are waiting in the straw, in the cracks of your wooden bed, or on the coat of your neighbor's goat that brushed against you in the field. This is your fashion, your armor, and your torment. You don't take your clothes off to sleep. You only take them off to die. When you finally lie down on that wretched heap of straw at night, the warmth of your body triggers a feeding frenzy. You lie there in the dark, stiff and shivering, listening to the silence of the village, while your own body becomes a feast. You don't sleep. You just endure, waiting for the church bell to scream again, so you can drag your itchy, broken body back into the fields. You have lived through the itch, the hunger, and the back-breaking labor. But in the Middle Ages, there is one final, terrifying threshold, the moment your body fails you. And when it does, you don't go to a hospital. You go to the barber-surgeon. It is a name that sounds like a joke, but it is a death sentence. There is no such thing as a professional physician for people like you. The man who cuts your hair with a dull, rusty blade is the same man who performs surgery. He is not a healer. He is a mechanic of flesh, working with no knowledge of germs, no concept of sterile conditions, and absolutely no anesthesia. Imagine you have a toothache. It's been throbbing for 3 days, a sharp, electric pain that pulses in time with your heartbeat. You finally cave and go to the barber's shack. He doesn't wash his hands. He doesn't even know what a hand wash is. He reaches for an iron hook, the metal pitted with oxidation and stained with the dried blood of a dozen people who came before you. He tells you to sit on a wooden stump. He doesn't give you anything to numb the pain. No ether, no local anesthetic, not even a stiff drink if you're too poor to afford the ale. He just grunts, grabs your jaw with a grip of iron, and drives the hook into your gum. The sound of the tooth cracking is something that will haunt you forever. He yanks, he twists, and with a sickening pop, the tooth comes out, trailing shreds of gum and blood. You are left there gasping, spitting blood into the dirt, while he wipes his hands on his apron and asks for his payment. But that is the minor surgery. If you have a fever, the science of the time is even worse. They believe your body is governed by 4 humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. If you are sick, it simply means your humors are out of balance. And their solution? Bloodletting. They truly believe that draining your life force is the cure for everything from a common cold to the plague. The barber-surgeon takes a lancet, a small, sharp knife, and cuts into the vein of your inner elbow or your neck. He lets the blood flow into a bowl. They watch the color of the blood, looking for signs of corruption. You watch your own vitality drain away, feeling your head spin, your vision darkening at the edges, your heart fluttering as you lose consciousness from blood loss. If you survive the bloodletting, you are usually too weak to stand for days, but they call it a success. There are no antibiotics. Germ theory is a secret that won't be discovered for centuries. If you get a cut in the field and it starts to turn black, if the skin feels hot and the smell of rot begins to bloom, that is the end. There is no magic salve that can save you. They might smear crushed beetles or some foul-smelling herbal paste on it, but the infection is already running through your veins like wildfire. You will spend your final days in a fever dream, shivering under that one itchy wool blanket, your body fighting a war it is destined to lose. And the only one who comes to visit is the priest. He doesn't bring medicine. He brings last rites. He whispers prayers over you as you vomit and convulse, treating your physical agony as a spiritual test. In this world, medicine is not about healing. It is about witnessing your body turn against you while you are poked, prodded, and bled by a man who is more concerned with how fast he can finish your surgery so he can move on to his next haircut. When you are sick in the Middle Ages, you don't fight the disease, you fight the cure. Have you ever looked at a towering medieval castle and thought, I wish I could live there? You're probably picturing royal feasts, colorful banners, and a life of chivalry. But what if those stone walls could talk? What if they could tell you about the grime, the isolation, and the suffocating reality hidden behind those majestic ramparts? Today, we are pulling back the curtain on the medieval castle, a place that was never meant for comfort, but for survival. I'm your name, and today we are venturing into the dark, secret life of the medieval fortress. If you love digging into the shadows of history, smash that like button and subscribe. Would you have survived the royal life, or would you have begged to be a peasant? Let's step inside. Chapter 1. The Illusion of Grandeur. We romanticize the castle as a home, but in reality, it was a weapon of war. Look at those massive, thick walls and the tiny, narrow windows. They weren't designed to let in the sunlight. They were designed to keep arrows out. Inside, the castle was a freezing, damp nightmare. Stone is a terrible insulator. It absorbs the cold, the moisture, and the winter chill, holding onto it like a tomb. Even if you were the king himself, living in the great hall, you were never warm. You would have been wrapped in layers of heavy fur and wool, shivering as the draft whistled through the stone masonry. The royalty didn't live in comfort. They lived in a fortified cage. Chapter 2. The Chamber of Secrets. The Garderobe. Every castle had a garderobe, the medieval toilet. It sounds fancy, but it was essentially a stone chute built into the thick wall that dropped your waste directly into the moat, or a cesspit below. Here is the secret. They were named garderobes, which translates roughly to keep your clothes, because people noticed that the ammonia fumes rising from the waist below killed the fleas and lice that infested their robes. So, nobles would literally hang their spare tunics in the bathroom to sanitize them. Imagine the smell! But there was another danger. This sewer system was the castle's biggest vulnerability. During sieges, enemies often tried to climb into the castle through these very chutes. You couldn't even have a moment of privacy without fearing someone was climbing up to kill you. Chapter 3. The Feasts of Deception. We think of royal feasts as endless tables of fresh, delicious food. But in the Middle Ages, refrigeration didn't exist. During the winter, everything had to be salted, smoked, or pickled to keep it from rotting. The feast was often a display of power, not taste. The meat was frequently tough and overly salty, masked by heavy, imported spices like pepper, which cost more than a commoner's yearly wage. While the high nobles sat at the high table on a dais, everyone else sat below, competing for scraps. If you look closely at history, you'll see that the floor was often covered in rushes, which acted as a disgusting sponge for spilled wine. Grease and rotting bones tossed aside by guests. It wasn't a fairy tale banquet. It was a loud, messy, and often unsanitary struggle for dominance. Chapter 4. The Silent Prisoners. Deep beneath the grandeur lay the dungeons, the oubliette, a word derived from the French for to forget. These were not just rooms. They were pits, often with no doors, only a trap door in the ceiling. Prisoners were lowered into total darkness, where the air was thick with mold and the sound of dripping water. There was no light, no ventilation, and no hope. People were left there to be forgotten by the world. The castle wasn't just a home for the rich, it was a tomb for their enemies. When we look at the ruins of a medieval castle, we see a majestic, romantic monument of history. But if you were transported back to 1325, your first impression wouldn't be, wow. It would be a sudden, overwhelming urge to run away. These fortresses were not designed for comfort. They were engineered for paranoia. The walls, which seem so sturdy and impressive today, were designed to withstand the crushing weight of siege engines and the relentless rain of arrows. But in peacetime, those same walls were your enemies. They were made of cold, unyielding stone that pulled the heat directly out of your body. Imagine living in a room where the temperature never rose above freezing, even in the middle of summer. You would have been constantly wrapped in layers of thick, damp wool, your breath visible in the air, even while you sat near the hearth. The great hall, where the lords and ladies held their court, was a cavernous, drafty space. Smoke from the open fire pits would rise to the vaulted ceilings, but never quite escape, leaving the upper levels filled with a thick, acrid haze that stung your eyes and coated your lungs with soot. You would spend your entire life coughing, your eyes constantly watering, your clothes smelling of wood smoke and damp stone. There was no escape from the cold, and there was no escape from the soot. Chapter 2. The Chamber of Secrets. The Garderobe. Extended. Let's talk about the garderobe again, because the reality is even more disturbing than the history books admit. You see, the name garderobe, meaning keep your clothes, wasn't just about the ammonia killing the lice. It was about the architecture of survival. These toilets were built into the thickest parts of the outer walls, with a steep, narrow chute leading down to the base of the moat. But have you ever thought about the physics of a castle toilet? In the middle of winter, those chutes were essentially giant wind tunnels. Cold air would rush up from the moat, carrying the putrid, freezing stench of the sewage pond below directly into the room. If you were a noble using the garderobe, you were exposed to the elements from below, sitting on a cold stone seat while a draft of freezing, foul-smelling air blasted upwards, and then there was the constant fear of the moat climbers. Castles were frequently attacked by spies who would wait for the cover of darkness to crawl through the muck, climb into the garderobe chute, and sneak into the castle to assassinate the lord in his bed. Every time you used the restroom, you were quite literally sitting in the most vulnerable, dangerous spot in the entire fortress. You weren't just relieving yourself. You were watching the corridor for the flash of a blade. Chapter 3. The Feasts of Deception. Extended. The Royal Feast. You've seen it in movies. Golden goblets, endless platters of roasted meats, and joyous laughter. The truth is much darker. A medieval feast was a high-stakes political performance. If you were a guest, you didn't eat because you were hungry. You ate to prove your loyalty to the Lord. The food was a nightmare of preservation. To survive the winter, the castle stores were filled with salted, dried, and pickled food that had been sitting in barrels for months. The fresh meat was often heavily spiced with pepper, cloves, and cinnamon, not just for flavor, but to hide the fact that the meat was already turning rancid. You would sit at a table covered in a layer of rushes, a type of marsh plant that people threw on the floor to soak up the spilled wine, the grease dripping from the tables, and the bits of meat that fell from the knives. As the night went on, those rushes would become a rotting, squelching carpet of waste. Underneath your feet, you would hear the scurrying of rats, lured by the scent of the discarded bones and rotting vegetation. You were eating in the middle of a literal dumpster, surrounded by high-stakes political maneuvering, watching your neighbors whisper behind their cups, all while trying to ignore the fact that the person next to you might be planning your execution before the next dawn.